Nintendo's new president is officially in the driver's seat, and he's had some interesting comments about the future of their handheld ventures, including the possibility of a new 3DS. President Furukawa stated that they're considering various possibilities in regards to a 3DS successor, and I find this fascinating, Gabe. He says that they really want to make mobile platforms a main pillar of revenue, and we've heard recently from Reggie that the 3DS is doing incredibly well. Their 2DS and 3DS business has increased by 10% this calendar year versus last. Last December was up 27% over 2016 December. Is it weird to you that they really want to double down on this second pillar?
Well, yeah, it's really, really weird. They continue to sell these things at a pretty decent rate, but I guess where I just start getting confused is like, okay, great, you're selling so many of these, you're not making very many games. There are still games coming for the 3DS for the foreseeable future, we know that for a fact. There's still some very exciting things like Wario that you are going to be excited for as well, but I don't understand the trepidation behind just not unifying the platforms into the Switch. They're talking about bringing a successor to a 3DS to fruition at some point, and it does seem like that's something Nintendo wants to do. Like you said, they are making sure that their handheld business is staying strong, and I'm just wondering why the Switch isn't part of their handheld business. Like, why like 3DS? I get it, cheaper, right? You can probably sell more of them, but you're not making as many games. Like, I don't get it.
To me, the reasoning behind it makes sense, right? They want to have a cheaper alternative, primarily targeting a younger audience. You know, the 3DS and 2DS are very successful, partially because they have a huge install base and they have a huge games library, right? There's well over 1,000 3DS games. There's so much to choose from, whether you want first-party titles, you want licensed titles, you want cat and dog simulators. You have a lot that you can pick from, and So the reasoning to inject another one of these into the market space makes sense. Obviously, mobile is something that they have focused on a lot recently. They have worked with Dina and other companies to make that a priority, and I could see them thinking, oh, maybe we can get these things to, you know, continue to proliferate on our own platform. We saw that Pokemon Quest released both on phones and on Switch, which was kind of an interesting idea, regardless of the merits of that game. Where I get confused is what do you do tech-wise and hardware-wise with this console? Because you have to keep it, I guess, lower than the Switch, but better than the 3DS, but still reasonable enough that you can price it, you know, at least $100 lower than the Switch, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just causes all kinds of confusion, right? We know that the next core Pokemon experience is coming to Switch, so when this thing happens, is Pokemon going right back to, like, handhelds only and maybe not so much consoles? Like, it's a confusing situation, and one that can be easily solved if they just double down on Switch and start, I mean, I'm sure that this is already happening, right? But they're working on whatever's after Switch, console-wise. Why not make sure that thing is, like, up to par so you can have parity, you can have the third-party support you want, and then have Switch be your handheld. And of course, Switch is going to live as the console for now. But if you kind of start ushering 2DS and 3DS out, make Switch the focus for handheld, you can work on what's next and make sure that that's going to be a huge hit with your core audience. I don't know, man. I would do things so much differently if I were Nintendo, but I want to also, you know, state, and this is very important, they are way smarter than us. They know what they're doing. They've ran a successful business for a very long time. I'm sure they're going to continue to. It's just, I can't understand the thinking behind it.
Behind the scenes, financially, obviously, you know, their handheld division must be incredibly profitable, and they want to continue that. And at some level, two is better than one, right? If you have two things to sell. Reggie specifically called out that the 2DS and 3DS kind of are the first gaming device for 5, 6, 7-year-olds. So maybe they go even younger, like they target even younger for their next dedicated handheld, whereas the Switch is kind of like the
Wait, Zach,
core gamer machine.
Younger than a 5-year-old?
No, I'm saying younger than like currently, right? So if the Switch is for everyone, I don't know, 13 and up, then maybe for, you know, people that are totally relying on their parents, that their parents don't want to dump $300 into something, that they want something small, that they want something that if it breaks, it's not as big of a deal, that they want something that has simpler experiences. I'm sure development on 3DS is shorter and cheaper than on Switch. You know, we had this brilliant dreamscape when the Switch came out that they would unify, that all the cool stuff that came to the handheld platform would be moved over to Switch. In some ways that has happened, but in a lot of ways it hasn't. And so I think clearly Nintendo is not of that mind. They have reinforced time and time again that unification isn't really what they want. And maybe they feel that with the 50-50 split we're seeing now between people that play Switch handheld and people that play Switch at home, maybe, look, they're, like you said, they're working on whatever's next after Switch, whether it is a half step and a more powerful Switch or a straight up dedicated home console. I don't know. But if they boost that, this 3DS successor is not coming out anytime soon, right? So maybe this is something that releases once the Switch, achieves its next form. And so then the new 3DS kind of takes the Switch technology and is a handheld only version of that. There's some different avenues they could go. I'd be curious to know what you guys think in the comments down below. But a streaming only or an all digital, I guess would be a better way to say it, platform, something that has an always online connection and there's no cartridge slot. But again, that like even contradicts kind of how they want to do things, right? Because that would completely erase the past, the ability to put your old cartridges in. And I feel like futuristic all online type ideas aren't really where Nintendo's headspace is at. So to me, you throw that out and you say, okay, this is going to be something that can be backwards compatible and is targeted at a younger audience and maybe also has, see, it's hard because then you can't really. So Switch is your single screen console and this is your double screen. Like, I mean, you need the two screens if you're going to be backwards compatible with 3DS.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move somewhere different. What I was like thinking, right? It's because the quote says that they're exploring what they want to do with like handheld stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Technically, Switch falls under that. So what if? And this is because we had this conversation a long time ago on the channel, like where I said something along the lines of, "Hey, whatever the next console is, like, there's no way they can like retract and go back to like a home console that isn't portable. Like, I don't think Nintendo can ever do that." Because they've introduced like such a winning, gimmick isn't the word, but
the hybrid nature does wonders for them, and
it's perfect.
It elevates a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, if for some reason they want to get back to like, hey, this is a home console, you can't take this thing on the go. It's going to be way more powerful than what you're used to from us. Try to achieve some parity. I don't think this happens, but then that does make Switch their handheld like division. Because him saying that they're exploring options, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's like a new handheld. Maybe Switch is the handheld now, and whatever. Like that's the only instance I can see that.
Like a progressive phasing of Switch from the main pillar to the secondary pillar, and you introduce a new main pillar.
Yeah. That would make sense. Again, probably not a likely scenario whatsoever. But I mean, Zach, if I asked you like a year ago, like, hey, they're gonna put out like a successor to the 3DS, and the Switch is not it. So I mean, you wouldn't believe me, right? Like a year ago.
Yeah, I kind of hold on to the quote about wanting the mobile stuff to be more successful. They say right now it's about 4% of their total sales, and they want to have that become a main pillar. So if you are able to put out a device that is more powerful than the 3DS, that is cheap, that can run and play and be the main home and hub for these mobile type efforts, and target that much younger audience with much simpler games, much simpler titles, which in theory would be sort of just a cash cow to then fund your Mario Odyssey 2s and your Breath of the Wild 2s or whatever the successors are there. Maybe that's kind of the way to go. It seems like this is becoming it's not the same thought process that existed when they put out the 3DS. It seems like this is going to target a much younger and more specific audience, maybe. I think the possibility for sales is still huge, but to me in the past, it was like, okay, Nintendo has their home console and Nintendo has their handheld, and they're both equally important. And I'm sure they're important to them behind the scenes, but it feels like we're going in a direction where the Switch is going to still get the focus. This secondary thing is just going to exist for that younger, sort of, hey, we want something to fill that $150 price point.
Yeah, I just don't understand. All these kids have iPads. They all have tablets and phones. And so put your Nintendo games on mobile the way you've been doing. Those have proven to be successful. Then you still have Switch, which is also portable. Like, how many?
I think we just don't interact with a lot of the people that this appeals to. I think the YouTube audience the Twitter audience, the people that are consistently following gaming news, following releases. I don't think this, whatever various possibilities they're considering, I don't think this appeals to them. Also, you have to realize, like, Nintendo probably would love to dominate this market, and right now there's nothing else, right? The Vita is basically done. We've heard some like very random rumors about like a successor there, or someone stepping in and delivering a new handheld. As of right now, there's nothing. So to completely leave that void, like, that would also be silly. So from that perspective, I see why Nintendo would want to do this. Like, absolutely, right? Why, if you have a chance to capitalize, why not?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a valid point. It's just that the handheld market is where it is for a reason. Phones have a huge impact on it. And
so how do you find a device that can exist between phones and Switch and still be worthwhile, still sell? And I think maybe the answer is, for us, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Maybe it really does just target younger audiences with more introductory type games, simpler experiences, mobile type experiences, but it's still a Nintendo. It's still a video game console. It still has cooler stuff than, a phone. And I don't know. I don't think there should be a worry that, oh gosh, they're going to focus Zelda, time and effort on this thing instead of on the Switch. I don't think that's something that, is going to be a problem. I still feel like unification may not happen, but all of the tentpole game focus is going to be here. We are seeing like some redos and some remakes on 3DS, but outside of WarioWare Gold, like, okay, it's Luigi's Mansion again. That's a game from how many years ago? And, the Mario plus Luigi games getting remixes, like, again, games from how many years ago? We're not seeing like, oh my god, there's a new Mario on 3DS, and I don't know that. I'm sure there'll be Mario on whatever this is if it comes to fruition, but I don't think anyone should really be like, crap, they're taking all of the resources away from Switch. Why aren't they just focusing? I still think, they still say their aim is for every person to own a Switch, and that they're going to start emphasizing like Switch per person instead of just like Switch per household. So who knows? It's a very interesting idea, and I think it's most interesting because it clashes so mightily with what we expected or what we hoped for. But I'm curious to know you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Let us know how you feel about all of this. And until next time, everybody, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest and greatest from the Switch and from whatever new President Furukawa does next. We've got you covered. Follow us on Twitter and Discord. Link in the description below. And for myself and Gabe, have a fantastic weekend. We love you. Switch Force, out.